everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have a layout that I made for a punched out Thursday to Die For using a sketch from Christie's Beautiful Life, 30 Days of Sketches, Series 9. This is the Day 4 sketch, and this beautiful sketch was made by Brenda Ragsdale. I had a super major case of scrapbooker's block, and I wasn't sure what to do to snap myself out of it. So I decided that I was going to, number one, use a sketch, and number two, I was not going to create the most amazing layout I've ever created. I just decided that I had to just make something. So I pushed forward, and although I did not put out a video last week, and I'm sorry about that, I just couldn't put together anything that I thought looked decent. I just wasn't able to get a scrapbook layout out, and I apologize for that, but I think that I have broken through my block and I'm back on track again. The photos that I'm using today are of my younger daughter, Julia. They're from quite a few years ago. She has sunglasses on that have the American flag on them. So I wanted to incorporate that into the layout without making it an out and out red, white, and blue flag themed layout. So I decided that I was going to use some of the colors of the American flag, but I wasn't going to limit myself to red, white, and blue. In the background, I have a pattern paper that has all different color lines on it, very light lines. And I'm using a very large navy blue circle and then a red circle. And I first cut these out using some inexpensive white cardstock. I didn't want to cut into the pattern papers before I was sure what sizes to cut them, and I'm glad I did because I ended up switching up the sizes. The sketch has a banner on the left-hand side of the layout, and I wanted to make it out of this really pretty goldish yellow paper, but I didn't have enough of it to make the size banner that I wanted. I thought that that little banner looked too small in comparison to the two large circles, so I decided that I was going to use two banners, and this stripe banner is using some pattern paper that was in my yellow scrap bin. I'm using some chipped sapphire distress oxide, and I ink the edges of the two circles and the two banners, and I ink the edges of most of the pattern paper that I put on the layout. And I really needed to use a sketch to get myself going on this layout, but I'm still trying to work through all the sketches in 30 Days of Sketches from Series 9. Series 10 is coming out in a couple of months, and I had promised myself that I would create a layout for each of the sketches, so I'm going to try to do that. I don't know if I'll get them all done before Series 10 comes out, but that is something that I'm going to continue to do because I really do love working with sketches. When I cut out the blue circle, I didn't cut it out perfectly, so I hid the imperfection underneath the red circle. And now I'm layering these two banners on top of each other. I could have just used the striped banner, but I really liked the solid yellow, so I think it worked out fine that I used both of those banners. So I'm following the sketch and I'm putting the banners in between the two circles. And I use ATG adhesive to attach most things together on my layouts. These photos are of my younger daughter, Julia. They measure 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. I have them mounted on some white heavyweight cardstock, and these were taken on her 15th birthday, which is a lot of years ago at this point. Now she's 22 years old. Following along with the sketch, I wanted to put a piece of paper in the lower right-hand corner of the photo, and I used this star paper from the Vicki Boutin Storyteller collection, which I thought went really well with the rest of the layout. I used my Creative Memories corner rounder, which is a punch because it's punched out Thursday to Die For. I wanted to make sure I was using some punches on my page, so I rounded that corner. And then I was looking through the chipboard and I noticed a couple of cute sentiments that I thought would look nice on the layout. The one on the top that says, "You are some kind of wonderful." And then the long one on the bottom says, "Good sense of humor and a beautiful heart." Of course, I think all those things are true about my daughter. And so I thought that these would be good additions to this page. I use my T-square a lot on this page. I was putting everything on crooked. I don't know why that was suddenly a problem on this layout, but luckily I had the T-square and that helped me straighten things out. I'm adding some chipboard tickets on the left-hand side of the layout. Right now I just have a blue one there, and then I use my EK Success Scalloped Photo Corner Punch, my all-time favorite punch, I think, and I punched out some yellow or gold photo corners, and I'm again using the Distress Oxide to ink the edges. Then I'm going to use my ATG adhesive and attach all 4 photo corners down to the photos. I was looking through the ephemera pack and I found this title that says Happy Soul, and I thought that was a great title for this layout. Like I said, it was a birthday layout and there was this American flag theme, but I just wanted to keep the entire layout kind of neutral in theme and just make it about Julia. I added another chipboard ticket. I added a yellow one to the left of the layout, and then I put a label underneath the photos to add my date to later. I also decided that I wanted to add a border around the outside, so I used that same red paper that I used to make the circle. I cut the layout down a little bit on each side. I used the chip sapphire and I inked around the edges, and now I'm going to assemble everything together. I like to mount a gutted piece of paper on a piece of scrap paper. Sometimes I just find those gutted pieces of paper are a little bit hard to work with. So this is a really old piece of paper. I cut it a little smaller than 12 by 12. That just helps me to not have to line up everything so perfectly. Now that the red paper is mounted to the piece of 12 by 12 inch or slightly smaller than 12 by 12 inch scrap paper, I'm attaching my layout down to the red border. I really like adding borders to my layouts. The only drawback is that when I take photos of the layout, sometimes it could be a little difficult to take the photo including the border and have the border look even, but I still continue to add them because I really like them. And usually if I take enough photos of the layout, I can get it right. In the sketch, the title is in the lower right-hand corner. I decided to put it above the photo. There was a little bit more room there, and I think it would have looked nice in either space, but as soon as I moved it on top of the photo, I thought it looked just a little bit better there. I wanted to add some other embellishments to the layout, so I decided to add stars. I introduced some turquoise into the layout because I thought that it would be a good addition along with the yellow. And of course, this is one of the colors that's in this Storyteller collection. I used the dies. I cut out several different size stars. I inked the edges with the chip sapphire Distress Oxide. I layered them on top of each other and I glued them together. For the larger stars, I also cut out a piece of white cardstock, thick white cardstock, and I attached that behind the stars. And that step takes a little bit more time. It's not necessary. It's just a personal preference of mine. I like to have a sturdy backing for my embellishments that I cut out using my dies. In addition to cutting out the larger stars, I also cut out some really small ones. I always like those little touches of like the little tiny embellishments around the larger ones. I didn't include too many of those tiny stars. I added a couple to each of those 3 clusters that I now have around the layout. And even though they're really tiny, I did ink the edges of all of those stars as well. The whole time I was making this layout, I was thinking that I wanted to add something behind the photos. And then once I added the turquoise stars, I thought that I just had to go ahead and add a turquoise piece of paper behind the 2 photos. But then once I cut the piece of paper, I got a little distracted and I started moving the title around. I moved around a couple of those stars up at the top. And then I was thinking that this layout might look better with a little bit of stitching. I'm going to do some hand stitching around the 2 large circles on the layout. I'm using this little Amy Tangerine paper piercer, and I just punch some holes around the outside of both of the circles. I don't measure, I just go by eye, and if the stitches aren't perfect, I'm okay with that too. before I stitch the paper, I go back to that piece of turquoise paper that I'm going to put behind the two photos. I mount the turquoise paper on some thick white cardstock. I just thought that it would give a little bit of dimension and a little bit of strength to that piece of turquoise pattern paper. It's going to be sitting on top of a lot of different layers and on top of some of the stitching. So I had a piece of white paper and I decided that that would just give it a little bit more strength. I once again added some of the Distress Oxide to the edges of the paper, and now I'm putting it back where it was, although I do have to move some of the elements around because now the photos are taking up a little bit more room because of the matting. So I make those adjustments and then I put everything back in place. For the stitching, I was thinking of using different colors, but then I just finally settled on using some white embroidery thread. I use all 6 strands of a very inexpensive embroidery thread that I got at Michael's, and I have been using it ever since the pandemic. I ordered a big pack of white embroidery thread, and I do like to add hand stitching to my layouts. I just love the texture that it adds. So I stitched all around both of those circles, and I didn't stitch in places where the stitching wasn't going to show. I switched up 2 of those tiny stars because I wanted to have navy blue in the top cluster, and I realized there wasn't any, so I added a navy blue star there. And then I added some enamel dots to the banners. I used dark blue ones for the striped banner and a red one for the yellow banner. And then I added some enamel dots to each of the photo corners. I added a different color of a small enamel dot on each of those punched out corners. And then I was thinking a little bit of sparkle would finish off this page, so I'm using these super tiny rhinestones. I put them in the centers of all of the stars, the big ones and the small ones, and I also scatter a couple of them around each of the clusters. Just a few. I don't go crazy with adding the rhinestones, but a couple of them just added the right amount of sparkle, I thought. And then after I added the rhinestones, I wanted to add a date to the label that's under the photo. So I set the date stamp to the correct date. And I tried it out. You can't see it, but I did a test run on that little scrap of paper. And when I was sure that it was correct, I stamped it onto the label. And then I add a little rhinestone to both sides of the label. And the layout is complete. Here are some close-ups of the layout. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really enjoyed making this layout, and I'm glad I am back in the groove of creating. Please take a look in the description box. You'll find links to all of the other incredible ladies who create layouts for A Punched Out Thursday to Die For. I hope everybody has a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.